Are you ready?
Shammer, drop off.
Coming to you live on the air.
You are now tuned in. An informed state of mind.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to ISOM, an informed state of mind. I'll be your host, Luke. Today I want to talk a little bit about, it's going to be off the cuff a little bit here. I'm going to be talking about fuel prices and why they've gone skyrocketed. Food prices, why they've gone kind of skyrocketed. One has certainly a relationship with the other, as far as I can tell. And it really comes down to a lot of different things. Tax certainly is going to be one of them. There's a carbon tax here in Canada that certain countries are not having to deal with at this time, but we are certainly. I'm not going to get into too much about why we have the carbon tax. There's enough in the news about that. I watched a documentary on a slight one here, or a program, The Fifth Estate. If anybody's familiar with that, I'm sure most people are familiar with The Fifth Estate. And we're talking about Nutrition North and how unaffordable food is in the remote northern communities. And they're talking about some of the prices of things doubling, such as water, for instance. And of course, this is such a fundamental portion of being alive in the world. We certainly need water. Water is huge. It's down there on our 4 pillars of survival. I did a little bit of looking at that, and what I noticed about this is they didn't talk about fuel prices, and that wasn't really part of it. They talked about taxes. They talked about profits. They even talked about initiatives that were put in there with northern communities, for instance. So it was a subsidy that was offered by the government. They would just almost put in about $1 billion into that subsidy. Now, and this was given right to the companies so that they could deliver food to the northern remote communities and keeping costs low. So that was that subsidy. Now, that subsidy, of course, for every dollar put into it, they're suggesting that only 67 cents of that dollar is actually accountable. The rest, they can't account for. Now, we could say that there's some funds being just held back as a profit, and most likely is the case. But when we look back over to say, well, why is it that's taking place? And they say, look, it's not us. It's just the nature of things. It's the nature of transportation. So I wanted to look at that without being biased. I wanted to look at that and just say, okay, well, what could be driving up that cost? Now, since 2019, jet fuel prices have indeed experienced a significant surge. I mean, of this week alone, the U.S. jet fuel spot price stands at about $3.50 per gallon, according to data from the Energy Information Administration. Now, while this price has decreased from its highs reached in April, it remains approximately doubled a year ago price of $1.70, $1.75 per gallon. So this price spike far outstrips the 51% year-over-year jump in gasoline prices. Now, those increased jet fuel costs is particularly impactful because fuel can account for as much as a third of an airline expense. So, for instance, we have just we had a trip planned off to the United States. We're going to go to the Grand Canyon. We're going to meet up with a good friend of this show, certainly, and known the gentleman for 8 years and hadn't met him yet, so we were looking at doing that. Turns out that we had booked a cheap flight on Lynx Airline, and come to find out yesterday, we got a notification that Lynx Airline basically went belly up. They went bankrupt. Now, I'm not suggesting it's just fuel prices. There could have been a lot of different things contributing to that, but it was certainly, from our standpoint, a little disheartening. Saying, well, why did this take place? They're offering cheap flights, okay? Now, when you're going to do that, you're going to be limiting your profit margin. You're not going to be able to stack away cash in the sense of emergencies, repairs, and so forth, upgrading fleets, and the list goes on. And so, you know, as that would be, they went belly up. And so we said, okay, we're in the process of trying to get our money back, which looks like we're going to probably do okay, but you know, we'll find out once we get some communications back from the credit card company that we had to purchase the ticket on. It's when we look at those fuel prices. So, for instance, A ticket from New York to San Francisco now costs $662, give or take, depending on where you're getting it from. Nearly doubling since 2019. 2019, it sounds very familiar for everybody because that was sort of the inception of COVID-19. And so international flights, of course, have also seen prices increase from Los Angeles to London, England, a ticket averaging $977, representing a 23% jump from 2019. So when you summarize that, jet fuel prices have indeed doubled, impacting, of course, airfares and contributing to the challenges faced by the aviation industry, without a doubt. When we look back at talking about the northern communities, they didn't talk about the jet fuel prices. Now, if we were to look at that, that would be a major contributing factor, transportation. Now, transportation, of course, when you're saying, well, we're going to transport that, now that doubles, that shouldn't double the overall price. So there is still some missing information there, without a doubt, right? But if we're looking at carbon taxes, and this is across the board, so if it's delivery on the ground, for instance, from the manufacturer, if the manufacturer has to deal with inflation. So, I mean, there's an absolute domino effect to all of this. And to say, well, we just don't understand this, and to blame the actual supplier, I don't think is completely accurate, right? I would say that there's probably some blame there, but at the same instance, a business who was in business at 2018 was expected to make certain profits. This is how businesses grow. This is how they get new innovations. This is how they streamline things. I mean, this is the idea. This is how they improve wages and so on. And sometimes when wages are forced to be raised, minimum wage, for instance, I mean, this is domino effect. People are not in the idea of business to lose money. Not at any given step of the way that we don't want to lose money when you own a business. So to think that these major business chains, when they say, well, they're in for the business, well, absolutely, of course they're in for that. And that just happens to be their product is groceries. Why this kind of has hit home here today for myself is, and most of you guys know from listening to the original podcast, the first one here talking a bit about ourselves, where we kind of come from, what we're doing here in life. Know that I have a part-time job on top of my career, and this part-time job is a pretty significant role that I'm playing in our community, our province. Without this position, believe it or not, the world would stop for us here, without a doubt. And one of the things that I do is I jump on a plane and I travel to remote areas in northern Canada, and we make a drop, and then we get back on the plane again and we come back home. The commodity that we're delivering is absolutely crucial. Without it, like I said, our world stops, pretty well dead in its tracks. So, and again, it's just two pilots and myself and my partner. We get on the plane, we go, we come back. And so, for instance, one of our flights is 2 hours from our home base. It's 2 hours north. We arrive, we offload the cargo, and we get back on the plane and we come home. Now, this particular case, yesterday we had to go to another northern community, and we had to touch down. Again, we were there for approximately an hour, back on the plane again, and we came back to our home base. Now, all in all, it took us about 12 hours. Okay, it was a 12-hour shift, a long day, right? And jumping around on this small Beechcraft. The Beechcraft, I was kind of curious. I was talking to the pilots about what does it actually cost round trip for, our company or our organization to do this flight. So we pass it certainly back on, and it gets down to actually who flips that bill. But it's about approximately $20,000 in jet fuel costs and associated with the cost to run that plane. Right, that's including the pilot's wages and so on and so forth. Approximately $20,000 for that round trip. The mileage would probably help, and I don't have the mileage on that, exactly what we're flying, but if anybody out there understands what a Beechcraft takes for fuel, when we go up, we fuel up again. When we get to the northern community, we touch down, we fuel up again, and and again, we're always topping off that fuel as you would. But overall, it's $20,000. If, because of the time of year that we're in right now, we've got to de-ice that plane, it's approximately $18 to $20 a liter. That's a liter. Sorry for you U.S. folks there. But that's a liter, $20 a liter. And it could cost upwards of $2,000 to de-ice a small Beechcraft aircraft. Those numbers are huge. So that's going to have to be passed along. So again, it only goes back to talking about those associated costs with delivering food, for instance. All it takes is one bad storm to increase that money up there. They can say, well, that's where the company's going to take a loss. No, they're not. It's a business. So they're going to project, they're going to try to forecast what those costs are going to be from previous years, and there's still no guarantees. So again, there's so many associated costs that people are just not talking about because they haven't dove into it as deep as they should have. So it's just one takeaway that I thought I'd kind of put in there because, like I said, and then of course there's our wages as well that are put into that, right? So I mean, at the end of the day, what does it cost a round trip if we had bad weather to bring something so essential to that community that, you know, the cost could be upwards of almost $3,000, right? On top of the $20,000 just for the jet fuel alone. So, like I said, and you've got there's probably some other things that I'm not even considering, right? So it's a lot of money, you know, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people are really considering. So one thing to kind of take home there. So when we're looking at all of those particular things that are adding up, so we're looking at inflation, we're looking at cost of living, we're looking at just tax, as far as carbon taxes. If taxes are going up, if there's a supply chain issue. So what are the contributing factors to fuel price jump, right? Whether it's jet fuel or certainly whether it's gasoline or diesel. Supply chain disruptions, increased demand, geopolitical tensions, crude oil prices, environmental regulations, market speculation. I mean, to name a few, these are all issues that can contribute to this. So while we could say that, you know, the food prices in northern communities, for instance, where transportation of that is one of the bulk costs to that, to say it's all a supplier issue, I think is incorrect. And this is what I mean by, you know, a slanted look at something or not looking at all the facts or whether there's a bias put in place. When discovering information, this can hurt the overall outcome of the information gathered, right? And the overall, perspective. Even when I'm looking at somebody like the Fifth Estate, for instance, which has been around a very, very long time, most people would look at them being a non-biased reporting or opinion-pieced or journalist's platform. I just find that it seems to be happening more and more on a lot of different levels. So these biases that we bring with us, we have to be so very careful. We have to make sure that we stop and actually go and analyze all the information. Now, when we can break down all those individual factors, whether it's carbon tax, whether it's inflation, or whether it's geopolitical tensions, or crude oil prices themselves, or supply and demand, or supply chain disruptions, we can believe it. We don't have to believe it. It just depends. But if you take each one of those individual categories and you explore them, you'll start to find some truths. And at that point, if we actually dive in as deep as we can to each one of the categories that contribute to one main theme, we'll come to find out that maybe there's some people who say they're not lying are not lying. You know, there's a lot of different things that we're not exploring. It's easy for us to say this is the problem and this is the problem. But did we look at what got us to that problem to begin with, right? There's a lot of different ways we can react. Money is money. Cost of production is certainly its cost of production. And if there's other factors that are added on top of that, well, that's going to start to add up. So what would be the solution? Well, you can start to live 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Start to try to produce your own food, whether that's on a balcony of an apartment building. Beans and peas grow fairly quickly. And so if you're in an area that can support that as far as a season, and you're on the right side of the building, you can avail from nights of sunlight, you'll do all right. Beans and peas certainly will grow without that. But like I said, even that tiny little supplement of vegetables, for instance, whether it's lettuces that grow quite rapidly, quite frankly, if you could take the effort to actually put some of the onus back onto the individual, you would maybe find that and pull away from our entertainment aspect of it and say, I'm going to take away an hour of watching television or sitting on my phone and actually devote that to growing my own food. You could offset some of that cost. Now, would it be significant? No, but there's a few different things that take place there. Certainly there's the psychological effect saying, hey, I'm doing something for myself, right? Which, of course, is going to put you in more positive, a positive environment, so to speak, where you're seeing something grow and you're taking pride in that. It's you that's doing that. And that's going to be positive behavior. That's going to lead to a positive outlook, right? So it can be keeping you positive, which is good. And that's a number one step in making sure that you're successful with something is staying positive about it, regardless of the effect, right, or the outcome. So we want to make sure that we're looking at all the information, putting bias aside, and saying we have to look it through before we start to point the finger. I think that's really, really important because, I mean, bias is certainly taking place from all categories in life right now, right? So I just wanted to touch base on that. I think it was just kind of a decent example to say that, we're looking at fuel prices and even our jet fuel, for instance, which was the key takeaway here. There's a domino effect. It adds to everything, right? So especially when it comes down to transportation. Is there waste? I have no doubt that there's waste. Now, could we do a better job with it? I have no doubt we could do a better job, right? But it's just one example of that when biases take place, we can come by information not as honestly as we should, and therefore holding us back from what we would consider to be facts or the truth, and giving us a better outcome when it comes to what we've decided on a particular subject. All right. So I just wanted to put that out there today. Hopefully that reaches people okay. That's probably going to lead us into our next podcast, which I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to cover bias. And bias is probably another important piece in our process here of trying to lay out a platform that's systematic to some degree, in some kind of order, paving a way, if you would, to greater understanding of the world that you live in and how you can benefit from that. So thanks for tuning into this one. We'll look forward to that next one. It's going to come out in probably a couple of days after this, and about bias. So look for that one, and go ahead and make sure you follow us there, and give us a rating if you can get over on the main page. The other thing is if you've got something to comment on, you can reach us over on X, on the post, reach us on the Facebook page, An Informed State of Mind, and again, you'll be able to find us over on the YouTube channel where you can have an in-depth conversation with others. So until next time, folks, we'll just stay prepared and stay informed. Take care. Echo, did you like the show? This has been a Rush Creek production.